unfortunately, there is aspects that you'll learn about yourself that aren't very good, and you have to learn these. You have to learn everything, and you can't go, oh, I was a terrible person because I did this, or it's just like I was in this situation, I allowed it to happen, and I think that was the biggest thing for me was actually realizing that I was allowing them to treat me like this, and I couldn't be blaming them for everything. Like I was part of it as well, and I needed to, that was the worst thing. Like realizing, that I was contributing to it. It's just like that was such a kick in the butt for me.
Hey, and welcome back. It's Pat Mesiti's best-selling author podcast. Karyn Bond is here. Karyn is a relationship recovery coach. Her website is talktokaryn.com, and that is Karyn with a Y, so that's talktokaryn.com. And if you're the kind of person that wishes you could stop repeating your mistakes or let go of your baggage or have a positive outlook on life or just get rid of all the bad and focus more on the good, then we're exactly in the right place, because we have Karyn here to tell us about some of the problems we're facing, some solutions, what she's gone through, what her insights are. So Karyn, glad to be speaking with you.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. And so as far as the problem that you solve and just what has you excited about it, I mean, tell us about what's the service that you provide.
So basically mine is centrally it's around narcissistic relationships, but there's other forms of toxic relationships that people can be involved in. And I think they all sort of, they interlink to a degree, because people will attract toxic people into their life regardless of narcissism or any other sort of toxicity, because of traumas that they've gone through in their lives, and this is how they interact with others. They need that toxicity to feel like the relationship is a good relationship.
And that's a little messed up, but I can relate. And you hear little tidbits of this, right? About how sometimes like bad things happen in your childhood, and then you kind of bring that with you into adulthood. And you hear these words thrown around like narcissism and toxic relationships. And like, what do those things mean? 'Cause especially nowadays with the way that psychology has been popularized, sometimes even this term like narcissist, it's used kind of like way like ADHD is used, right? Someone says it informally, but then it's been used so much, sometimes we don't know what it means. So when someone says, okay, like a narcissism or narcissistic person, what is that?
Yeah. So a narcissistic person is basically they only care about themselves. So everything that they do is in to what they want. So they will treat people like when they initially meet someone, as far as romantic relationships are concerned, they will just shower the person with gifts and compliments and just everything to make them feel like they're the most important person in the world. And once they've got them roped in, that's when they start with like what they call gaslighting, which is making people doubt what they're thinking and what they're saying, and they're always doubting their own actions. And it just basically wears a person out to the point where they just can't function as a normal person, because they just don't think that they think there's something wrong with them, and they're trained to believe that they're a lesser person, because this is what the narcissist needs. They need this person to look up to them, to treat them like they're the most important person in the world, and that all their needs are met by this other person. And it's very...
And that makes yeah. It's quite a mess, isn't it? And you hear about some of these terms like the narcissistic supply and the gaslighting and the love bombing, and sometimes we hear about these things, and it puts these past relationships into a new perspective, doesn't it? You say,
Yeah.
man, it started like this, and where did it go wrong? And it was driving me crazy, and I was doing all these things. But then you come across the label, and you're like, okay, so it's not this unique situation to me. It's just something that has happened. Some people are like this is their behavior, and now there's ways of dealing with them now that we've identified the problem. So as far as you and your journey, where did the interaction with the narcissistic people begin for you?
So I unfortunately have a mother who's very narcissistic, and subconsciously I was entering into these relationships with narcissistic men with the belief that if I could fix them, then that would fix my relationship with my mother, and that's not how it works. And unfortunately, our parents do play a large role in, because obviously they're the main people that we're always with. They can heal and they can harm, unfortunately. Sometimes,
And I,
but unfortunately, that's the way it goes.
and I want to know more about this because, and you're welcome to be as negative or as positive as you want. But as far as your relationship with your narcissistic mother and the relationship with the narcissistic men, like what was that like? How did it start? What did it seem like?
I think because growing up, I was never ever shown any affection. So when I was meeting these men, they're showing me affection, and I'm thinking, oh, well, this is great. Like, someone thinks something of me that they want to show me affection. And you get into that whole, you know, first time you're in a relationship and everything's great, and you're treated like a queen, and then it just slowly over time just slowly dissipates, and you sort of just wake up one day and go, what happened? How did I get to this point? And I think that's through my healing journey, I have now recognized where that started happening, and like what caused me to get into this place in the first place.
Okay. And so I think that we could definitely benefit from some kind of like a narcissism detector, right? Because so that way we know, like, okay, I'm in this situation. And so how do you tell the difference? Like, how do you know that you're in a relationship with a narcissist versus someone who is just has a good first impression or is really nice at first in a relationship?
So narcissists, they will always try and make out that they always want to be the center of attention. Like, now, it's not always saying that that everyone who wants to be the center of attention is a narcissist, but these ones, they have to be doing things that make them look like they're so wonderful and that everyone's always praising them. They can't do any wrong, and they would just be, anyone who criticizes them are ostracized very quickly. So a normal person, if you said to them, if they were doing something and you pointed that out to them, they'd be like, okay, that's fair enough. But a narcissist they can get quite nasty about it.
And this is helpful, right? Especially in the quest for the rest of us to be better people. Like this is always on my mind, this idea of being told if I'm wrong, right? If I say something wrong or I do something wrong or make a mistake, it seems to me like a true sign of maturity is to take that in and to not get too offended. And I'm not sure how I unlearned that or why I learned that to begin with. I don't know if that was like the people in my life, like kind of I caught it or it kind of rubbed off on me. But
Yep.
I'm like really thinking about like, okay, I want to avoid the tendencies like that and be a good person. And so you're saying that this kind of red flag is they need to be the center of attention. And then if you contradict them in some way, then they will cut you out. They'll ostracize you.
Yep.
And so so if we don't have this narcissism detector or this kind of training here, like what usually happens? Do we just like keep like scrambling to please them or like don't have any sense of boundaries? Like what's the downhill slide when we're dealing with this narcissistic person?
So that pretty much does cover it. It says you are always trying to please this person. Everything you do is about making them happy. And I found through my relationships, it didn't matter how much I tried to make them happy, I was never ever successful. And I think that's part of it, that they just keep on pushing you to keep on pleasing them without concern of what it's doing to you. And you just get to the point where you go, nothing I do is right. I can't do anything right. You're constantly criticized for things that you do. You never, anything that you do good, that's never acknowledged. Like, oh, you did a great job with that, or whatever. It's never good enough.
Okay, and so I'm kind of drawing like a roadmap in my mind, right? There's like you meet them and it's great, and then you get to the point where nothing that you do is ever good enough. So it seems like the logical steps in front of us is first breaking free of the cycle and kind of recognizing that something needs to change, and then after that, maybe somehow dealing with the narcissist and changing our behavior and changing our relationship with them. And so, what was it like for you finally waking up and saying like, well, hey, this is, I can't continue anymore. I'm so exhausted. I don't like being pushed around. Like was there a moment of realization for you, or just how did it get to this point with your mother or with these men of just like recognizing the narcissistic pattern?
So I had to go through 2 narcissistic relationships to realize that there was something going on that shouldn't be. So I just stepped back and like, I think initially I did blame myself for the relationships falling apart, thinking that, I'd done something wrong. But it wasn't a case of anything that I'd done. It was just more of a case of they weren't controlling me as much as they liked. So that's when it became really, really, really bad. I know with my ex-husband, because he wasn't the center of attention, he wasn't controlling me. I wasn't doing what he wanted me to do. He would start arguments, and we would, 5 or 6 times a day, would be arguing, and it would be over silly little things that weren't even worth arguing over. But it was just so draining, and I sort of got to the point where I'm not arguing anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And he would just keep on push, push, push until he found something that would make me just bite back and have that fight with him. And it's just, when he left, it was just such a relief. And I thought, I'll take some time to myself and get over the whole thing. But unfortunately, I still at that point didn't know that subconsciously I was still attracting these type of men because of my childhood stuff that I went through. So it was after the second one that I've just gone, you know what, I just need to, there needs to be, I did see counsellors, I did see psychologists, and I got something from all of them, but I didn't get everything that I needed. And through my own research, I found out about trauma bonding, and that's what I was actually doing. So I needed to work on myself to overcome that and stop, and that way then to stop attracting these toxic people into my life.
Wonderful. And there's like all these cliches about this, right? That you keep dating the same person, and unfortunately, it's true. And also, there's this aspect you mentioned of sometimes it takes years to reach a simple conclusion, right? Of
Yep.
just kind of digging through your own psychology there.
Yep.
And so like you got to the point where you said, I'm tired of being pushed around, my buttons being pushed, always arguing, and then you had this alone time, and then you felt better, and it was like, okay, time to work on myself. And what I like a lot about what you said was you were talking about how like you had to make the change, and that's
Yep.
like another one of those, like, I mean, huge life lessons, right? If you're unhappy, if you don't like your situation, well, no one's going to fix it for you. And the painful part is sometimes changing or getting rid of some of these kind of relationships. And so what was that like for you? Because I mean, it's easy enough to say, oh, get this person out of my life, but you have this kind of emotional bond. So what advice do you have when to someone who like needs a divorce or needs this like toxic mother out of their life? It's painful to get rid of someone that you've known for all these years. So what can be done?
Yeah. So unfortunately, there is aspects that you'll learn about yourself that aren't very good, and you have to learn these. You have to learn everything, and you can't go, oh, I was a terrible person because I did this, or it's just like, I was in this situation, I allowed it to happen. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, was actually realizing that I was allowing them to treat me like this. And I couldn't be blaming them for everything. Like I was part of it as well. And I needed to that was the worst thing, like realizing, that I was contributing to it. It's just like, that was such a kick in the butt for me.
It takes two to tango, they say, right?
Yeah.
That like you allow this to happen, and in any situation, right? You have a friend, you have someone in the workplace, you have a boss. It's like if this keeps happening, then you are letting it happen, and so there's different things to be done about the person, right? Sometimes you get a divorce, you don't see the person, but in other situations, maybe they're a family member and you can't really fully get rid of them, or maybe you get the divorce, but you still have to like communicate somewhat because there's like the kid involved or something like that. And so what advice do you have about keeping your distance or managing if you like can't completely go no contact? Like what are the tools to stop them from still bossing you around even from a distance?
Well, this is where boundaries come into play. So everyone's obviously different in what they feel is adequate for them. So I do have a child with my last narcissistic partner, and initially we did go no contact because I did have to take a protection order out against him because of his behaviour. But we now are having to speak to each other because of our son. So I just make sure that before we have contact, that if I do need to speak to him, that I've got a list of things that I need to speak to him about, and I always remain calm. There was some information I had to give him one time, and he got quite aggressive about it. And I said, look, I know this, I can just see this is triggering you. I said, but I just have to give you this information. And you have to step back and just pretend that you're someone else looking at it from the outside in. So, and you just need to just maintain that presence of like, I'm not going to allow you to treat me this way, and stand fast with that. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're doing the wrong thing by maintaining your own boundaries.
I like it. So be prepared, be organized, have your list, and then step back. And it's almost like you're an actor in a movie and you're like, hey, I have to play this role.
Yep.
I have to give this sort of information and get this done. And so I'm glad that this topic of boundaries has come up because I've heard it, I've used it, I've applied it, but I'm not exactly sure like what the definition of it is exactly, despite using it. So boundaries, what does it mean to you, and like sort of what's the definition?
So with me personally, my boundaries are on how I expect to be treated, and how I expect to be spoken to. And if I feel that someone's stepping over that boundary, I give them that opportunity to, obviously rectify that. But if they're not willing to, meet me on my level, then I'm just going to leave that, and we either deal with it later or we don't. If it's not anything that we need to discuss, then it's just like, I'll, see you later. I'm not going to put up.
Okay. Yeah, the time of putting up is over.
Yeah.
So you say, here's I've decided, here's how I'm going to be treated, and here's how I'm going to be spoken to. And if that is not met, then I've decided like what the consequences will be, what I'll do, which might mean no contact or might mean just back off and strictly business. And so
Yeah.
it's helpful to have a plan and to not react emotionally and not have this knee-jerk reaction, right? We're just kind of getting this rules, this logic in place in order to behave better. And as far as navigating all this, is there any advice that you wish you'd gotten earlier or going in, or just anything that's really helped you as far as the rules?
Oh, there's been so many things, and it's quite funny because I actually test, like I hear things and I'll try and test them out. So I was looking into like conversations with other people, and when they start to raise their voice, and how we obviously we counteract that because we want to be heard, and it can escalate quite quickly. So I actually had a friend who was he was quite upset, and he was sort of yelling at me, and I just kept maintained the same tone, and I just spoke to him calmly. and he eventually came back down to my level. So it's really important not to escalate a situation, especially in those sort of scenarios. But I find if you just maintain that steady tone, and if you don't, I know it's really hard, but if you don't bring the emotion into it, I've learnt over time too with different roles that some people need to vent, and that's great. And generally, probably 95% of people, once they've had their vent, they're great. You can get on with the conversation. You just get that small percentage of people that just want to keep on venting, and they just have to be right. And you just have to sort of know when to draw the line and say, look, this conversation's not going anywhere. This is what I've got from this conversation. If you don't have anything else to add to that, then there's not really much point in us continuing. So they'll either then, walk away from that conversation, or they will, go, okay, well, this is, and I've actually had apologies, which has been quite good. It's just like, they've realised that what they were doing was not acceptable.
And that's great. And so that way we can set a better example and react more rationally, and we don't have to join in and pour the gasoline on the fire. And it seems like your logic here boils down to what's useful and productive, right? If someone keeps on increasing, escalating, they need a vent, and then they'll be fine, and then the conversation can continue, then there you go. That's how you navigate that. If they're the kind of person that they'll just, they don't know when, they don't know how to stop, and they keep making it worse and worse, and that's a conversation that's not going anywhere. So why put yourself through that? And it's great to think about it in these terms. That way we don't repeat these same cycles. We don't keep putting ourselves through the same predictable misery. We can think differently and act differently and have better and different results. And so now what has this led to for you? Now you're in the Light Bulb Moment book with Pat Mesiti.
Yep.
Do you have like a practice? Do you help others? Do you do coaching? Like, how has this led to you being a communicator and a speaker?
So I do have a program that basically, it's an 8-step program which sort of takes you through the whole understanding of what narcissism is. And then I think that was my biggest thing. I didn't understand what it was either. So, I mean, if you don't understand what it is, you don't know how to react to it. So that was why I've started at the beginning to understand that. And it also helps you realize, once you know what that is, you can then sort of reflect and say, well, this has come into my life at this point, and this is how it's affected me. And that makes it a lot easier then to move forward and go, well, this is how I can heal from this now. And so, yeah, it just runs through all the steps of basically what I've done as far as learning how to heal, and the most important things that you need to focus on as far as getting to the other side. Like you need to, I think the biggest thing is with people when they go through these type of relationships, they always put themselves last. And everyone's unique, and everyone has their own special qualities, and they need to understand that they're important, and then they need to nurture their talents and skills, and understand that they are important. It's not selfish to put yourself first.
I agree completely. And I like that this new line of thinking is required to say, well, hey, identify the narcissism that's happening in these people that are doing this, so that way you can see the pattern. That way you can get the perspective and clarity on the past. That way you understand what happened. That way you stop beating yourself up. That way you can begin to heal. That way you can raise your self-esteem, and that way you can proceed with confidence and make better decisions and have better relationships of all kind moving forward, just because you've identified this problem. You're not just putting a Band-Aid on things. You identified the root cause, and you said, okay, now it makes a lot of sense now that I've identified the narcissism and the behavior and the rules, and I have the tools and the responses, and this is something that we need, as opposed to, as we said earlier, just responding in the same way or that they treat us, and then it's just a bunch of nastiness going around, or it's being on this road of the bad self-worth. And so that way we can pick up the pieces and just be like better people in general. And so as far as us being on this journey of self-help and recovery and feeling better, do you have any advice for increasing the self-esteem or just any words of reassurance for those people that have just felt really just beat up, down on themselves, etc.?
I think it's important to look at what you enjoy doing, because everyone has things that they enjoy doing, and that it makes them feel good about themselves. And it's important that they focus on doing these things and at least set aside time to do them. Make them a priority in their life, because you need to be like, if you can have a relationship, but you still are separate people. You still need to have your own things that you each do. And it doesn't mean that you can't work as a relationship. It just means it makes it stronger, because they've got their thing that they're doing, you've got your thing that you're doing, but you have things that you'll do together. And when you're in these toxic relationships, it's just basically they're overpowering everything that you do, and it's generally what they want to do. It's not what you want to do. And you need to understand and go back to what you enjoy doing. Like, for some people, it's reading a book. For me, I found going back to the gym was very helpful for me mentally and physically. And that was another thing. Like, it was just I was made to feel so bad about myself that I put on so much weight. And then that you've got that cycle of, I'm fat, nothing fits me, I look terrible. So you're just in a constant downward spiral of depression.
And we don't want that. We want to break free of that. And so these are some helpful, important questions to ask. Ask ourselves, what do I enjoy doing? Or maybe even, what did I used to enjoy doing before I got into this toxic relationship? And then when can I find the time to do it? And I found that very helpful, right? Because it's easy to say like, oh, I should get back to the gym, or I should get back to reading. And you're saying like, well, find the time to do it, because
Yep.
with all the chaos of day to day, especially the chaos from your narcissistic partner and your own behavior from that, perhaps you'll come up with excuses and say, oh, well, where is the time? So
Yep.
we find the time to do it. We figure out something that gives us joy. And I also like how your suggestions don't have to be crazy and extreme, right? It doesn't have to be like, oh, I should go back to school or start sailboating or parachuting. You're just like saying like, hey, did you like to read that book or that book series? Maybe pick that up again, or go back to the gym. Just do something that's just you, to get some of your identity, individuality, personality back. And it might even help your relationship in general, right? Because now you do your separate things and you can come back together, and it doesn't have to be just being around all of the toxicity. And so this is wonderful and helpful for us to think about. And as far as next steps, if someone says, hey, this is an area of my life that I really want to focus on and improve, and Karyn can be the person that can help me, perhaps. I like the idea of her course. So how can someone find out about that course, your website, and find out more about you?
So I do have a webinar that runs through the sort of basic steps of the program. So it will be up on the website soon, and yeah, so people can access that. And I find that it's important to also have a group with, like, a group conversation with other people that have been through the same thing, because I feel like a lot of people feel that they're the only ones that are going through this, and that no one else would understand. And there is a lot of people, like, statistically in Australia, you're looking at potentially 5 million people are going to end up in one of these types of relationships. So that's a lot of people. And if I can help them to not go through that, or, recover from that, then, just helping one person, I've made a difference for what I've gone through.
Wonderful. And that's great advice, right? Have some people on your team. You don't have to go it alone. There's strength in numbers. And so where is that website? Where should someone go?
So my website is talktokaryn.com. So that will have, I've got some other helpful stuff on there that I've also used through my healing journey. I've done a lot of spiritual stuff as well as physical. I'm not very big into modern medicine. I prefer to take a more natural approach. And I think that's the biggest thing too with people. They'll get diagnosed with depression or anxiety, and they'll be given pills to take. And these pills, they're not natural. They're not designed for people for their bodies to actually absorb them and be beneficial. As you know, the more you can stay away from chemicals, the better off your recovery will be.
I agree completely. It's scary to have that cycle of you have the pills and then there's side effects and then
Yep.
they give you more pills and it leads to other things. And it's better to keep that to a minimum if that is possible. And it's also good just to work on ourselves and get the self-help figured out. And the place to do that is by going to talktokaryn.com. That is talktokaryn.com. And as we're wrapping up our conversation here, Karyn, I'd like to ask my guest about a fun quote or lesson that perhaps can help us and send us on our way. So does anything come to mind for you as far as a helpful quote or lesson?
I think the biggest thing is for everyone to understand that they're important, they are unique, and to not let the actions of other people make them doubt themselves. You know, if you're doing the right thing and you're happy, don't let anyone else take that away from you.
I love it. You have the power to choose how you're treated, and what you allow to happen is what will continue with you. So break the cycle, believe in yourself, and you can accomplish great things. And it begins by you going to talktokaryn.com. Karyn Bond, relationship coach, narcissist expert. Wonderful speaking with you.
Thanks so much for having me.